The epic landscape introduction, the journey home. Perhaps no concept resonates more deeply across human experience than the magnetic pull toward a place we belong, home. The word itself carries weight beyond its single-syllable gravitational force, evoking not merely shelter, but identity, connection, and purpose. Throughout millennia, across countless cultures, the story of the homeward journey has captivated our collective imagination. We see, reflected in it, our deepest longings, our own battles against forces that keep us adrift. When Odysseus departed the smoldering ruins of Troy, he anticipated a voyage of mere weeks. Instead, fate would claim a decade of his life, 10 years, entangled with monsters and gods, weathering temptations and terrors, enduring loss and profound transformation. Why does this ancient tale continue to echo so powerfully across 3 millennia? Perhaps because we glimpse in Odysseus fragments of ourselves, the part that yearns for home, while simultaneously being seduced by adventure, the self that struggles between obligation and desire, the spirit that confronts both external obstacles and internal demons on the path toward wholeness. Even in our modern world, Odysseus's shadow stretches long. We see him in the combat veteran returning from war, irrevocably altered by what they've witnessed, in the refugee navigating treacherous waters, clinging to dreams of safety, in the lost soul wandering through life, seeking to rediscover their authentic self. The hero's journey represents, at its essence, a path of transformation. We depart as one person and return as another, sculpted by what we've endured, what we've sacrificed, and what wisdom we've gained. This epic transcends mere ancient adventure. It maps the very landscape of human experience. To truly comprehend this timeless narrative, we must first understand the world from which it emerged, a world already ancient history to Homer himself. These events unfolded around 1200 BCE, during the twilight of what we now call the Bronze Age. Sophisticated civilization of ornate palaces and intricate trade networks, of written records and complex royal bureaucracies, of thriving city-states and naval powers. Yet this world teetered on the precipice of collapse. Between 1200 and 1150 BCE, civilizations throughout the eastern Mediterranean experienced catastrophic breakdown. Mighty cities crumbled, empires toppled, writing systems vanished, and trade networks disintegrated. Scholars continue to debate the precise causes: climate shifts, seismic activity, foreign invasions, internal uprisings, or some perfect storm combining these factors. What remains undisputed is the aftermath. A complex international system yielded to centuries of what historians term the Greek Dark Age. During this shadowed period, tales of the Trojan War and its aftermath persisted through oral tradition, passing from generation to generation like precious heirlooms. When finally committed to writing, likely in the 8th century BCE, these stories preserved memories of a lost golden age, filtered through centuries of spoken retelling. This creates a fascinating dual perspective within the poem set. In the Bronze Age realm of kings and heroes, yet composed in the emerging world of city-states, colonial expansion, and literacy's revival. Archaeologists have long scrutinized how much historical truth might underpin Homer's epic. Heinrich Schliemann's discovery of Troy in the 1870s confirmed the city itself was no mere legend. Excavations at Mycenae, Pylos, and Ithaca have unearthed palace complexes remarkably consistent with those described in the poems. Yet this work transcends simple history. It represents something more profound, cultural memory transformed into art, seamlessly interweaving myth with reality, the divine with human experience, the fantastical with the painfully authentic. Sing to me, O Muse, of the man of many devices. These immortal words open one of humanity's greatest literary achievements. Yet the identity of their composer remains one of literature's most enduring enigmas. Who was Homer? A singular poetic genius, a collective name representing many bards, perhaps even a woman, as some scholars have proposed. We may never unravel this mystery. Ancient traditions portray Homer as a blind poet from Ionia in what is now Western Turkey. 7 cities claim to be his birthplace, while his name itself may derive from a word meaning hostage or one who follows. Whatever the truth behind his identity, Homer represents the zenith of a sophisticated oral poetic tradition, one that enabled epics of astonishing complexity to be composed and transmitted across generations without writing. How did this extraordinary feat of memory work? The key lay in what scholars call formulaic composition. Far from rote memorization, Homeric bards mastered an intricate system of metrical building blocks, phrases, scenes, and narrative patterns that could be artfully assembled during performance. These poet-singers, known as oiadoi, weren't simply reciting fixed texts, but actively composing in real time, breathing new life into ancient tales while preserving their essence. They served as the living archives of their civilization, vessels carrying not merely entertaining stories, but the very cultural DNA of their society, its values, history, and collective identity. The revolutionary arrival of alphabetic writing around the 8th century BCE forever changed how these oral masterpieces would be transmitted. Whether commissioned by rulers like Pisistratus of Athens, as tradition suggests, or through some other cultural mechanism, the transition from spoken word to written text represents one of humanity's pivotal intellectual transformations. The Odyssey we read today bears unmistakable fingerprints of its oral ancestry, the hypnotic repetition of epithets like Windark Sea and Gride Athena, the rhythmic patterns of familiar scenes, and narrative techniques that once served as memory aids. Yet beneath these oral features lies evidence of singular artistic brilliance, a unified vision that could only emerge from a master storyteller's mind. This ancient epic transcends simple adventure storytelling. Its architecture is as ingeniously crafted as the famous Trojan horse itself, employing sophisticated narrative techniques that would echo through literature for thousands of years. Homer's most brilliant stroke may be his decision to begin in medias res, plunging us directly into the middle of events, rather than chronologically following Odysseus from Troy's smoking ruins. We first encounter our hero in his 7th year of captivity on Calypso's island. His legendary encounters with the Cyclops, the seductive Sirens, and the monstrous Scylla and Charybdis emerge later through Odysseus's own storytelling to the Phaeacians. This creates a narrative tapestry of remarkable complexity. The poem's 24 books span a mere 40 days of present time, yet encompass a decade of wandering through strategically placed flashbacks. The epic also employs ring composition, an elegant structural technique where themes and motifs appear, then later return in reverse order, creating a perfectly balanced symmetry. Divine assemblies frame both the beginning and ending of the work, forming a cosmic circle around the human drama. Telemachus's quest to find his father creates a poetic mirror to Odysseus's own homeward journey, While the son traverses the sea seeking knowledge, the father battles supernatural forces to return to the same shores. This mirroring extends brilliantly to hospitality. Lemachus enjoys the sacred custom properly observed in the courts of Nestor and Menelaus, standing in stark contrast to the grotesque violation of these same principles by the suitors desecrating his home. These intricate patterns serve as more than artistic flourishes. They establish profound thematic resonances that illuminate the epic's core messages about honor, identity, and social order. The very language of the epic embodies this sophisticated artistry, composed in dactylic hexameter, 6 metrical feet per line, with each foot typically comprising one stressed syllable, followed by 2 unstressed ones. The Greek text pulses with a distinctive rhythmic cadence that served both aesthetic and practical purposes. This hypnotic meter became the defining poetic form for epic storytelling throughout Western literary tradition, its undulating pattern carrying listeners across vast narrative landscapes. When juxtaposed with its companion masterpiece, the Iliad, the Odyssey reveals fascinating contrasts in theme and spirit. Where the Iliad confines itself to the blood-soaked fields outside Troy, celebrating martial prowess, glorious death, and the terrible splendor of warfare, the Odyssey expands across seas and strange lands, embracing a more expansive emotional and geographical terrain. It transforms heroic values, no longer exalting the warrior who dies spectacularly in battle, but celebrating the survivor who navigates peril through wisdom. This is not a poem about conquering enemies, but about mastering oneself. Not about dying magnificently, but about living meaningfully. At this epic's heart stands a revolutionary protagonist. Odysseus embodies a new heroic paradigm that would resonate through literature for millennia to come. In the Iliad, he appears as a capable but secondary figure, competent warrior, and respected advisor, yet overshadowed by mightier combatants like godlike Achilles and towering Ajax. His defining triumph emerges only after that epic concludes, when his brilliant stratagem, the legendary Trojan horse, accomplishes what a decade of direct warfare could not: the fall of Troy's impregnable walls. This emphasis on intellect over brute force defines Odysseus. His very name suggests trouble and cunning, possibly derived from the Greek verb odousomai, meaning to be wrathful against or to hate, but carrying undertones of troublemaking and deception. Homer reinforces this identity through Odysseus's descriptive titles. He is Polytropos, man of many turns or many ways. He is Polymetus, of many devices or much cunning. He is Poikolometus, of various wiles. These qualities, rather than strength or speed, define his heroism. This emphasis on intelligence reflects a shift in heroic values. The post-Trojan War world rewards not those who can conquer cities, but those who can navigate complex social and supernatural threats while preserving their identity and relationships. Odysseus represents survival through adaptability, a hero for uncertain times. Yet, Odysseus's defining strength becomes his tragic flaw. His cleverness breeds hubris, most fatally in the Cyclops episode, where he cannot resist revealing his true name to the blinded Polyphemus. This act of intellectual pride triggers Poseidon's wrath and condemns his men to years of suffering. There's an inherent duality to Odysseus that makes him fascinatingly human. He is both the faithful husband who rejects immortality to return to Penelope, and the wanderer who spends years in other women's beds. He is both the loving father who weeps at the sight of his son, and the commander whose recklessness costs his entire crew their lives. He is both the master storyteller who charms the Phaeacians and the master liar who deceives friend and foe alike. This complexity makes Odysseus the first truly psychological hero in Western literature, a man whose internal struggles are as compelling as his external adventures. His journey is not just across dangerous seas, but through the treacherous waters of his own nature. While Odysseus struggles against gods and monsters to return home, his kingdom of Ithaca faces its own crisis, one that threatens the very foundation of the kingdom itself. Imagine Ithaca as Homer paints it, a rugged, wind-swept island rising from the sapphire Ionian Sea. Though modest in size and wealth compared to neighboring kingdoms, it remains the heart's treasure of its long-absent ruler. The once orderly palace that stood as a symbol of rightful governance has descended into chaos during Odysseus's 20-year absence. For 3 years, 108 young aristocrats from Ithaca and nearby islands have transformed the royal residence into their personal playground, nominally pursuing Penelope's hand, but revealing themselves as something far more sinister. These so-called suitors reveal their true nature through their actions. Daily, they butcher Odysseus's prized livestock for extravagant feasts that drain the royal stores. They subject loyal servants to humiliation and abuse. They conspire in shadows to ambush and murder Telemachus, the rightful heir. Most damning of all, they flagrantly violate Xenia, the sacred laws of hospitality that form the very cornerstone of Greek civilization. As one character laments with bitter clarity, no reverence remains for the guest friend or supplicant, nor even for the immortal gods who rule the vast heavens. This situation lays bare a complete collapse of social and political order. The power vacuum left by Odysseus's absence has exposed the fragility of civilization itself. Telemachus, though coming of age, lacks the experience and authority to command respect. Penelope's uncertain status, neither confirmed widow nor actively married, leaves questions of succession dangerously unresolved. The Council of Elders, who should serve as guardians of tradition and justice, stand paralyzed, unwilling or unable to check the arrogance of these young nobles. The crisis gripping Ithaca transcends a simple tale of royal troubles. It becomes a profound meditation on governance and social cohesion. What happens when legitimate authority evaporates? How quickly can the customs and laws binding a society together unravel? Who bears responsibility for upholding justice when traditional guardians fail? The economic devastation alone is staggering. The suitors' extended occupation hemorrhages wealth that took generations to accumulate treasures, livestock, stores of wine, and grain, all devoured by these parasitic nobles. When Odysseus eventually returns, he will find not only his family in peril, but his very legacy and livelihood gutted. At the center of this maelstrom stands Penelope, walking an impossible tightrope between defiance and accommodation. Her predicament illuminates the precarious position of women in a society where male protection determines not just status but survival. Without husband, father, or grown son to champion her interests, she navigates a nearly impossible situation, armed only with her formidable intelligence and ingenious delaying tactics. For Telemachus, this crisis forces a painful transition to adulthood. Raised in the shadow of his father's legend, but within a household under siege, he struggles to forge his identity and assert his voice. His journey across the windark sea in search of news about Odysseus becomes as much a quest to discover himself as it is to learn his father's fate. No complete understanding of this epic is possible without acknowledging its divine dimension. The gods are not distant observers, but active participants in human affairs, shaping events both visibly and invisibly. Olympus functions as a celestial reflection of mortal society, with its own complex politics, rivalries, and alliances. Zeus maintains ultimate authority, yet each deity pursues individual agendas that create ripple effects throughout the mortal realm. This divine involvement creates a fascinating interplay between heavenly will and human agency that forms the philosophical core of the epic. Odysseus's destiny is caught between two powerful divine forces, Athena's unwavering support and Poseidon's relentless hatred. These deities embody more than mere supernatural allies and adversaries. They represent cosmic principles mirrored in Odysseus himself. Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, recognizes in Odysseus a mortal counterpart who embodies her ideals of intelligence, craft, and calculated action. Her assistance manifests not by removing obstacles entirely, but through crucial guidance and perfectly timed interventions at critical junctures. She represents practical wisdom, extending help to those who demonstrate the resourcefulness to help themselves. Poseidon's wrath stems from Odysseus's blinding of his son, the Cyclops Polyphemus. As ruler of seas, earthquakes, and horses, Poseidon embodies the untamable forces of nature, the chaos and danger that perpetually threaten human attempts at order. His opposition creates the fundamental tension driving Odysseus's journey, forcing the hero to navigate between cosmic powers beyond mortal control. Beyond these personal divine relationships lies a comprehensive religious framework governing the Homeric world. The gods demand proper worship and hospitality, while punishing transgressions and rewarding piety. They stand as guarantors of oaths and familial bonds. Xenia, the sacred practice of hospitality, receives particular emphasis, with Zeus himself bearing the epithet Xenios, protector of guests and supplicants. The flagrant violation of these customs by both the Cyclops and later the suitors marks them as enemies of divine order, deserving retribution. Yet the relationship between fate, Moira, and divine will remains deliberately ambiguous. Even Zeus acknowledges limitations to divine power. When mortals suffer beyond their destined portion, he attributes it to their own foolishness rather than divine design. This creates critical space for human accountability within a universe governed by immortal beings. This delicate tension between fate, divine will, and human agency creates the moral landscape of the poem world, where mortals make meaningful choices within constraints they did not create, and where divine justice manifests through natural consequences as much as supernatural intervention. The gods, despite their immense power, remain recognizably human in their motivations and limitations. They experience jealousy, pride, compassion, and wrath. They play favorites and nurse grudges. They debate policies and sometimes reverse their decisions. This humanization of the divine renders the cosmic order of the poem accessible rather than alien, familiar rather than wholly other. With these foundations established, the historical context, the poet, the structure, the hero, the crisis at home, and the divine framework, we can now follow the twin journeys forming the heart of this immortal epic: Telemachus's search for his father and Odysseus's arduous path home. This timeless epic continues to resonate across millennia because it captures the essence of what it means to be human, to struggle, to persevere, to transform. The Odyssey is not merely a tale of gods and monsters, but a profound meditation on identity, belonging, and the meaning of home. As we turn from these foundations to follow the parallel journeys of father and son, we witness the unfolding of one of literature's most enduring narratives, a story that has shaped our understanding of heroism, adversity, and the complicated path toward redemption. The twin quests of Telemachus and Odysseus represent two sides of the same human experience: the search for meaning and the longing for return. While Telemachus ventures outward to discover his heritage and himself, Odysseus battles inward and outward obstacles to reclaim what was lost. Together, their journeys illuminate the core truth that homecoming is never simply a physical return, but a profound reconciliation with one's authentic self and rightful place in the world. As we now venture deeper into this epic tale, following first the son's search for his father, and then the father's perilous voyage home, we witness a narrative tapestry that has inspired countless generations, testament to the enduring power of stories to illuminate the human's condition and chart the geography of our deepest longings. The son's quest, searching for a father-son Telemachus, a young man on the edge of adulthood, struggling to find his place in a world where his father's absence has left a gaping void. For most of his 20 years, Telemachus has lived a half-life, too young to remember his father, too old to remain passive in the face of the suitor's abuses. He has been raised in a palace under siege, watching as uninvited guests devour his inheritance and harass his mother. Without a father to guide him, he has grown uncertain, hesitant, a prince without authority in his own house. When we first meet Telemachus, he sits among the suitors, daydreaming of his father's return, imagining Odysseus bursting through the doors, driving the parasites from the palace, and reclaiming his rightful place. It is a fantasy of rescue rather than a plan for action. But divine intervention changes everything. Athena, disguised as Odysseus's old friend Mentes, visits the palace. She sees in Telemachus the potential to become like his father, not just in appearance, but in cunning and resolve. Her words spark something in the young man, planting the first seeds of independent action. "You must not cling to your boyhood any longer," she tells him. "You are no longer a child." This divine nudge propels Telemachus to his first political act, calling an assembly of the Ithacan elders, the first such gathering since Odysseus left for Troy 2 decades ago. Standing before the men of Ithaca, many of whom could barely recall when last they were summoned, Telemachus finds his voice. He denounces the suitors, appeals to the elders' sense of justice, and demands a ship to seek news of his father. In this moment, we see the first glimmers of the man he might become, a public figure stepping out of the shadow of both his absent father and his protective mother. The suitors respond with mockery. The community offers no help, yet Telemachus persists again with Athena's aid. Now disguised as mentor, she secures a ship and crew, slipping away from Ithaca under cover of night while the suitors feast, oblivious to his absence. His journey takes him first to Pylos, the kingdom of aged Nestor, who fought alongside Odysseus at Troy. Here, Telemachus encounters his first model of proper hospitality, warmly welcomed, bathed, feasted, and honored before Nestor even asks his name or purpose. Nestor, the oldest of the Greek chieftains who fought at Troy, represents living memory, a direct connection to Odysseus, the warrior. He tells Telemachus tales of his father's intelligence and strategic brilliance during the war. Though he has no news of Odysseus's current whereabouts, he confirms the image of a father worth finding, a man of exceptional qualities. From Pylos, Telemachus journeys by chariot to Sparta, accompanied by Nestor's son, Pisistratus. There he meets Menelaus and Helen, the couple whose marital troubles launched 1,000 ships and the Trojan War itself. The palace of Menelaus gleams with luxury, filled with treasures gathered during his own long journey home from Troy. Here again, Telemachus is received with exemplary hospitality. When Helen recognizes him as Odysseus's son by his striking resemblance to his father, we sense Telemachus growing into his identity. No longer just a boy left behind, Menelaus shares vital news, information he gained from the ancient sea god Proteus. Odysseus, he tells Telemachus, is alive but captive on the island of the nymph Calypso in great suffering. For the first time, Telemachus has confirmation that his father lives, and with it renewed purpose. But his journey's value extends beyond this intelligence. Through his travels, Telemachus gains perspective on his situation back home. He witnesses functional royal households, sees examples of marriages unlike the suspended animation of his parents' relationship, and observes how legitimate kingship operates. Perhaps most importantly, he begins to exhibit qualities associated with his father. He shows discretion when he chooses not to mention the suitors to Nestor, diplomatic tact when facing Helen, and strategic thinking when planning his return journey to avoid ambush. The education of Telemachus is not just about finding news of Odysseus. It is about becoming someone who could stand beside Odysseus, or in his place if necessary. Through interaction with his father's peers, Telemachus steps into the social world of heroic men, no longer confined to the increasingly feminized and compromised space of his father's palace. During his absence from Ithaca, the suitors discover he has gone. Outraged by this show of independence, and worried that he might return with news or allies that could threaten their position, they plan an ambush, intending to murder him at sea as he returns home. This escalation shows both how threatening even a symbolic assertion of authority appears to those who have none, and how Telemachus has grown from a negligible figure to one worth eliminating. The parallel journeys of father and son, both navigating dangerous waters toward home, create one of the poem's most powerful symmetries. Though they travel separately, their paths are destined to converge, two halves of a legacy-seeking reunion. While Telemachus sails the wind-dark sea in search of his father, Penelope remains at the palace, navigating her own treacherous waters. Her situation is a masterclass in the constrained agency of women in the ancient world. For nearly 20 years, she has maintained a precarious position, neither wife nor widow. With no confirmation of Odysseus's death, she cannot honorably remarry. Yet, with Odysseus absent and Telemachus too young to rule effectively, she lacks the male protection that legitimizes a woman's social standing. This leaves her vulnerable to the pressures of the suitors, her own family, and Ithacan society at large. Her response to this impossible situation reveals intelligence equal to her husband's, though expressed in different domains. Where Odysseus crafts tactical deceptions on his journey, Penelope weaves strategic delays at home. Most famous is her scheme with the shroud, promising to choose a new husband once she completes a funeral shroud for her father-in-law, Laertes. She works diligently at the loom by day, only to secretly unravel her progress each night. For 3 years, This ruse holds the suitors at bay until a disloyal servant woman reveals the deception. This is not merely a delaying tactic, but a profound symbol. The work of weaving traditionally defines female virtue in ancient Greek culture. By unraveling her own work, Penelope both fulfills and subverts feminine expectations simultaneously. She appears the model of wifely industry, while covertly resisting the very social pressure her weaving ostensibly acknowledges. Penelope's intelligence manifests in other ways, too. She carefully manages the suitors, sometimes placating them with appearances and formal courtesy, while never yielding the substance of her resistance. She extracts gifts from them, gaining material advantage, even as she continues to refuse their central demand. Her relationship with Telemachus reveals additional complexity. She has raised him alone, protected him from the suitors when he was younger, yet now must navigate his emerging independence. Their occasional tensions, as when he orders her back to her quarters during his first assertion of authority, reflect the awkward transition as he attempts to claim the male authority she has partially occupied in Odysseus's absence. She dreams of her husband, of her brother-in-law, who dwells in the land of the dead, of an eagle slaughtering geese that represent the suitors. These dreams offer both comfort and confusion, hinting at truths she cannot yet fully comprehend. When news arrives of Telemachus's journey and the suitors plot to murder him, Penelope's distress reveals her emotional vulnerability beneath the calculated facade. She remains a woman whose entire family hangs in a precarious balance between absence and death. Her position at the center of the household creates a unique vantage point. She observes which servants remain loyal and which have been corrupted by the suitors. She maintains relationships with those she trusts, particularly her faithful attendant, Euryclea, who once nursed both Odysseus and Telemachus. Through these domestic networks, she retains some power within the increasingly hostile space of her own home. Her tears and isolation maintain Odysseus's presence in his absence. By refusing to move forward, she creates a space where return remains possible. This steadfastness has elevated Penelope to an archetype of marital fidelity. Yet the poem suggests a more nuanced portrait than simple devotion. Her fidelity is active rather than passive, strategic rather than merely emotional. She demonstrates not just loyalty to her husband, but loyalty to her own authority and judgment. She remains faithful not only to Odysseus, but to herself, making her own decisions rather than submitting to the pressure of others. When the disguised Odysseus finally meets her late in the epic, their interaction becomes a complex dance of revelation and concealment, testing and being tested, suggests how well matched they truly are and why their reunion, when it finally comes, carries such emotional power. Beyond the central figures of Telemachus and Penelope lies the broader household, the oikos that forms the basic social and economic unit of ancient Greek life. The Ithacan royal household comprises not just the immediate family, but concentric circles of dependents, servants, slaves, herders, field workers, and others whose lives are intertwined with the fortunes of the ruling family. In Odysseus's absence, this entire structure has become distorted. In its prime, Odysseus's royal household functioned as the beating heart of Ithacan society, a sophisticated system where resources flowed from outlying farms and pastures to the palace, where they would be redistributed through elaborate feasts, ceremonial gift-giving, and calculated patronage. Every element had its proper place. Guests received hospitality according to their standing. Servants earned rewards proportionate to their loyalty, and social hierarchies remained intact through these carefully choreographed exchanges. They storm into the palace uninvited, yet demand the deference due to honored guests. They devour without giving, take without offering. Their presence poisons every aspect of palace life. They terrorize the servants with threats and violence, openly challenge Telemachus's birthright, and subject Penelope to relentless harassment. Their gluttonous appetites demanding multiple feasts daily rapidly drain resources meant to sustain the entire community throughout the year. Their behavior represents not merely a personal insult to Odysseus's family, but a fundamental violation of the social covenant that binds ruler to subjects, host to guest, present to future. The household staff reflects this fracturing social order. While numerous serving women have formed intimate relationships with various interlopers, further unraveling the household's unity. Even the physical architecture of the palace bears witness to this desecration. The great hallways, reserved for legitimate assemblies, honored guests, and sacred rituals, has degenerated into the venue for the suitors' endless revelry. Storerooms stand depleted, private chambers invaded. What was once an ordered cosmos of domestic life has descended into chaos. Beyond the palace walls, the devastation spreads across Odysseus's broader domains. The suitors slaughter livestock at alarming rates, threatening not just immediate provisions, but the future viability of the entire estate. The carefully maintained balance that would preserve herds across generations collapses under their short-sighted plundering. Executing the suitors, it requires a ritual purification of the household itself. Blood washed away, spaces fumigated with sulfur, boundaries re-established. His return represents not just personal vengeance, but the restoration of cosmic order. Perhaps most heartrending is faithful Argos, Odysseus's hunting hound, now a neglected creature, dying upon a dung heap. When he recognizes his master, the only being to do so instantly, without prompting, he musters the strength for one final tail wag before surrendering to death, having lived just long enough to witness his master's return. In Argos, we see embodied the outermost reaches of the household's decay loyalty, maintained even when all care and structure have been withdrawn. The crisis in Ithaca thus unfolds across multiple dimensions simultaneously: personal and familial, economic and political, social and moral. This multi-layered catastrophe gives Odysseus's homecoming its profound significance. He returns not merely as a husband to his wife, but as the restorer of proper order to a world turned upside down. What makes Homer's portrayal so remarkable is how masterfully he balances these societal implications with deeply intimate perspectives. The household exists both as complex system and as collection of individuals, as abstract structure and raw emotion. Part 2. The hero emerges, escape, and survival. After exploring the situation in Ithaca and following Telemachus's coming-of-age journey, Homer finally unveils our protagonist. But rather than finding Odysseus in the midst of glorious battle, we discover him in limbo, a prisoner in paradise on the island of Ogygia, surrounded by ethereal beauty. Lush gardens where fragrant cypress trees sway in gentle breezes. Abundant food appears at his fingertips, and the immortal Calypso shares her bed with him each night. She has even dangled before him what most humans desperately crave: life without aging, if only he will remain as her consort. eyes fixed on the distant horizon, tears streaming down his weathered face as he yearns for home. His weeping never ceases, his longing burns, undiminished by time's passage or creature comforts. This powerful image of man who rejects immortality because it would mean surrendering his very identity reveals Odysseus's core. A recognition that selfhood exists not in isolation, but in connection. Identity emerges from our relationships, our histories, our place within human community. Ogygia offers material abundance, but denies him his social existence. On Ithaca, no one would learn his fate. His name would fade from memory. He would exist outside the intricate web of relationships that gives his life purpose and meaning. Calypso herself emerges as a complex study in immortal psychology. Unlike the monsters Odysseus has confronted elsewhere, she genuinely loves him. She rescued him from certain death, nursed him back to health, and offered everything within her considerable divine power. Yet her island, which she tends in solitude, reflects both her godly creative capacity and her fundamental isolation of paradise, built for one now reluctantly shared. When Hermes arrives, bearing Zeus's command to release Odysseus, Calypso's response cuts with razor-sharp insight into divine hypocrisy. Male gods routinely seduce mortal women without consequence, she points out with bitter clarity. Yet, when a goddess dares love a mortal man, Olympus cannot tolerate it. Her complaint lays bare the gendered politics of the divine realm, perhaps revealing Homer's subtle critique of patriarchal power structures. Despite her heartache, Calypso ultimately aids Odysseus in constructing a raft to escape her island. She provides tools, materials, provisions, and navigational guidance. Her final gift, clothing that keeps him warm and dry at sea, symbolizes her enduring care, even as she relinquishes him to his chosen destiny. This Calypso episode crystallizes a central theme pulsing through the epic: the tension between temptation and homecoming. Throughout his wanderings, Odysseus confronts variations of this fundamental choice: immediate comfort versus future struggle, present pleasure versus reclaimed identity, the extraordinary versus the ordinary. Each time, after various delays and diversions, he recommits to Ithaca, to Penelope, to his mortal existence with all its limitations and precious connections. This choice resonates profoundly because of Odysseus's defining epithet, polytropos, man of many turns, or man of many ways. This suggests his remarkable adaptability, his capacity for transformation. He could become many things, inhabit countless lives, yet he insists on returning to his specific life, his particular identity. His mental flexibility exists in dynamic tension with his unwavering commitment to home. As his raft vanishes over the horizon, we glimpse Calypso on her shores, an immortal being, suddenly confronted with the transience that defines human experience. Her love for Odysseus has brought her closer to understanding mortality with all its poignancy and urgency. Perhaps this too forms part of the hero's legacy, transforming even the divine beings he encounters by embodying the particular dignity that comes with human limitation. Freedom from Calypso's island, however, hardly guarantees safety. 17 days into his voyage, with land finally appearing on the horizon, catastrophe strikes. Poseidon, returning from visiting the Ethiopians, spots Odysseus on his makeshift vessel and erupts in uncontrollable rage. The sea god has neither forgotten nor forgiven Odysseus for blinding his son, the Cyclops, Polyphemus. What follows ranks among the epic's most vivid sequences, a storm of truly divine proportions. Poseidon summons winds from every direction simultaneously, raises waves tall as mountains, and shrouds everything in impenetrable darkness. The raft Odysseus, so carefully crafted, disintegrates plank by plank. The sea itself rises against him with conscious malevolence, as if the very elements seek his destruction. This tempest embodies the terrifying power of natural forces, the chaos and violence lurking just beneath the surface of the orderly cosmos. For ancient maritime cultures, the sea represented both life-sustaining opportunity and ever-present danger. Every voyage constituted an act of courage, a temporary triumph over elemental powers that could reclaim the traveler in an instant. Odysseus's response reveals both his heroic qualities and hard-earned wisdom. Unlike earlier in his journey, when he might have defied the god directly, he now recognizes the futility of fighting Poseidon on his own terms. Instead of struggling against impossible odds, he adapts. When his raft finally shatters completely, he strips off Calypso's clothing now, dragging him downward, and straddles a single wooden beam like an experienced horseman. The sea goddess, Ino, also called Leucathea, appears, taking pity on the struggling hero. She offers her veil as a magical flotation device, instructing him to discard it once he reaches shore. This divine intervention, arriving precisely when Odysseus has exhausted his mortal strength. For 2 days and nights, Odysseus battles the merciless sea. Here we witness the hero stripped to his essence, raw physical endurance, pushing against impossible odds, knife-sharp mental resilience, refusing to surrender to despair, quick strategic thinking, adapting to each new threat, and an unquenchable will, burning even as strength wanes. When he finally glimpses Phaeacia's distant shoreline, hope flickers only to be crushed by the sight of jagged rocks where massive waves explode with bone-shattering force. Even here, exhausted beyond measure, Odysseus's tactical mind continues working, swimming parallel to shore despite muscles screaming for relief, fighting the undertow that threatens to drag him back to Poseidon's domain. He eventually navigates into a protected inlet, where the freshwater current provides a pathway to land. This moment of reaching shore transcends mere physical salvation. It marks Odysseus's symbolic transition from Poseidon's fluid, chaotic realm to the solid, ordered world of human society. His agonizing crawl from salt water to sand, where he collapses in complete exhaustion, mirrors both birth imagery, merging gasping from water into errand humanity's evolutionary journey from sea to land. Odysseus has endured not just a storm, but a symbolic death and rebirth, a purification by ordeal that prepares him for his next transformation. Finding shelter beneath 2 intertwined olive trees, one wild, one cultivated, Odysseus creates a nest of fallen leaves and surrenders to profound sleep. This humble bed perfectly captures his position at the threshold between worlds, nature and civilization intertwined, divine hostility yielding to human hospitality, the wild sea giving way to ordered community. After 20 days of unceasing struggle, he rests at last, poised to emerge into a new chapter of his journey. The Poseidon episode brilliantly demonstrates how Homer weaves realistic detail with cosmic significance. His description of the storm's mechanics, swimming techniques, and coastal geography reveals intimate knowledge of Mediterranean maritime conditions. Yet these physical challenges simultaneously function as spiritual and psychological trials. The storm exists simultaneously as natural disaster, divine retribution, external obstacle, and internal battle against despair. Through these layered meanings, Odysseus's survival acquires profound moral and philosophical dimensions. He endures not through physical strength alone, but through qualities of mind and spirit. His tenacity, adaptability, and stubborn refusal to surrender, even when stripped of every advantage, establish him as a revolutionary kind of hero. His greatness lies not in spectacular conquest, but in the quieter, deeper victory of continuing to exist when all forces divine, natural, and psychological demand his surrender. If the Calypso episode explores temptation and the storm sequence tests endurance, the Phaeacian interlude examines something equally essential: the reintegration of the isolated individual into human community. After years of captivity and days of solitary struggle against elemental forces, Odysseus must remember how to exist among people, how to speak, behave, and present himself in ways that earn acceptance rather than rejection. This delicate process begins with one of the poem's most enchanting scenes. Guided by Athena through a dream, she brings the palace laundry to wash in the fresh water, including her own garments, with thoughts of potential marriage subtly coloring her actions. After washing and spreading the clothing to dry in the sun, Nausicaa and her handmaidens engage in a carefree ball game. Their joyful shouts penetrate Odysseus's exhausted slumber. The handmaidens scatter in panic, but Nausicaa alone stands her ground, her courage subtly fortified by Athena's invisible presence. The encounter that follows showcases Odysseus's diplomatic brilliance. Though desperate for help, he recognizes that approaching the princess directly would only trigger fear. Instead, he maintains a respectful distance and delivers a speech of masterful tact. He compares her to the goddess Artemis, requests only the most basic assistance, and ends by appealing to her future happiness in marriage's subtle acknowledgement of her life stage. Through language alone, he transforms himself from threatening stranger to worthy supplicant, deserving compassion. Nausicaa responds with matching elegance and generosity. She provides not just clothing and food, but practical guidance, directions to the palace, and nuanced advice about approaching her parents. Her composure and generosity, remarkable in one so young, establish her as the embodiment of proper hospitality. If the suitors in Ithaca represent the violation of sacred guest-host obligations, Nausicaa exemplifies their perfect fulfillment. Beneath this formal exchange runs an undercurrent of unacknowledged attraction. Homer subtly indicates Nausicaa's interest in the mysterious foreigner through her aside to her handmaidens. For his part, Odysseus recognizes her exceptional qualities, paying her the highest compliment within his experience when he compares her to a young palm tree he once saw at Apollo's shrine in Delos, a rare moment where his wanderings provide a positive point of reference rather than trauma. Yet both understand the impossibility of deeper connection. Odysseus's heart remains fixed on home and his waiting wife. Nausicaa, despite youthful fascination, maintains the dignity proper to her position. Their interaction becomes a poignant study in paths not taken, potential futures acknowledged, appreciated, and gracefully set aside. It exemplifies the bittersweet recognition that life offers many possible stories, but we can live only one. Following Nausicaa's advice, Odysseus approaches the palace indirectly, receiving Athena's assistance in the form of a concealing mist as he navigates the city streets. The Phaeacian palace itself stands as the epic's vision of civilized perfection. The palace rises like a dream before Odysseus, walls gleaming with precious metals that catch the sunlight like captured stars. Surrounded by orchards where fruit hangs perpetually ripe, tended by servants whose hands possess almost magical skill. At the heart of this wonder sit Alcinous and Arete, rulers of a realm that war has never scarred, blessed with vessels that slice through waves, not merely like birds, but like thought itself, faster than imagination. When Odysseus approaches in supplication, his hands encircling Queen Arete's knees in that ancient gesture that transforms stranger to sacred guest, the Phaeacians demonstrate hospitality in its purest form. Without interrogation, they offer nourishment, shelter, and the promise of safe passage. Their treatment reveals wisdom beyond mere courtesy. They recognize in this ragged wanderer someone the gods themselves protect, a truth confirmed by Athena's invisible guardianship. The next day unfolds, with athletic competitions honoring their mysterious guest, when a brash, young Phaeacian athlete hurls not just a discus, but an insult, suggesting Odysseus bears the soft hands of a merchant rather than a warrior's calluses. Something awakens in the weathered hero. With casual mastery, Odysseus seizes a discus and launches it beyond all previous throws, his body remembering strength that hardship has tempered but not diminished. This seemingly small triumph contains the seed of prophecia, glimpse of how this solitary man will one day reclaim his home from the cluster of youthful usurpers who believe him weakened by time and trials. As evening descends and the feast begins, we witness the epic's emotional fulcrum. The blind bard Demodocus himself, touched by divine inspiration, sings first of a legendary quarrel between Achilles and Odysseus, then turns to the wooden horse, that brilliant deception that ended a decade of bloodshed. As these stories of his former self echo through the hall, Odysseus pulls his cloak before his face, tears streaming silently into the fabric, each drop a memory of comrades lost and hardships endured. King Alcinous alone notices this profound reaction and poses the question that transforms the entire narrative. Who are you? Tell us your name. With these words, the epic pivots from third-person distance to first-person intimacy. As Odysseus steps forward to claim his story and begin the four-book recounting of his extraordinary wanderings since Troy's fall, this moment of self-revelation carries the weight of rebirth. For the first time since washing ashore from Calypso's island, Odysseus publicly reclaims not just his name, but his entire identity. He emerges from the shadow of anonymity into the light of his own legend, creating a bridge between the glorious warrior of the past and the storm-battered supplicant of the present. The Phaeacians' rapt attention represents the first restoration of his social existence, a community that not only witnesses his suffering, but honors the resilience that carried him through it. The Phaeacian episode serves as a masterful narrative nexus. It provides Odysseus the perfect audience for his tale, creating the frame story that allows his previous adventures to unfold. It illustrates hospitality functioning as the gods intended, creating a stark contrast with its perversion by the suitors who plague his homeland. Perhaps most poignantly, it shows Odysseus relearning the intricate dance of social interaction skills that years of isolation had forced into dormancy. Beneath these functions lies something more profound. The Phaeacians themselves occupy a liminal space, not quite gods, yet blessed beyond ordinary mortals. Their miraculous ships, their divine favor, Their freedom from common struggle placed them precisely at the threshold between the pre-supernatural realms Odysseus has traversed and the flawed, complex human world to which he must return. They offer him a transitional sanctuary where extraordinary experiences can be processed, articulated, and integrated before he steps back into the harsh realities of mortal existence. When his tale concludes, the Phaeacians' response transcends mere hospitality. They shower him with treasures exceeding what Troy's plunder would have yielded had he sailed directly home. Their supernatural vessels deliver him, wrapped in exhausted slumber, directly to Ithaca's shore. With almost ceremonial care, they place both the man and his newfound wealth upon the beach before departing. This gentle passage from guest friend to restored king stands in stark contrast to the violent reclamation that awaits him. The Phaeacian interlude thus completes Odysseus' emergence from the underworld of isolation and namelessness, having endured divine imprisonment and battled elemental forces. Having reclaimed his identity and articulated his journey, he now stands poised to reclaim his rightful place. He returns not as a supplicant begging acceptance, but as a king determined to restore justice to a domain thrown into chaos by his absence. The cycle of reception, recognition, and restoration prepares him for the final and most difficult transformation, from wanderer to ruler, from storyteller to actor, from man alone to head of household and state. Part 3. The Wanderer's Tale. Odysseus reveals his journey in the gleaming hall of the Phaeacians. Odysseus rises to speak. His voice, weathered by salt and solitude, carries the weight of 10 tumultuous years. The gathered nobility leans forward, collectively holding their breath as the mysterious stranger prepares to unveil the lost chapters between Troy's smoldering ruins and Calypso's distant shore. "I am Odysseus, son of Laertes," he proclaims, the words hanging in the air like a battle standard unfurled after years of careful concealment. This declaration is no mere introduction, it is a reclamation of self. In a world where names channel power, like vessels channel wine, Odysseus had learned the steep price of revelation when his boast to the Cyclops unleashed Poseidon's relentless fury. Yet here, surrounded by potential allies, he dares to grasp his identity once more, like a warrior reclaiming his ancestral shield. His tale unfolds not as mere chronology, but as a tapestry woven with deliberate artistry. Odysseus reveals himself as masterful with words as with weapons, crafting his narrative with the same strategic brilliance that conceived the Trojan horse. He selects, arranges, and emphasizes each adventure to captivate his audience. The literal truth of every detail matters less than the emotional truth, the searing reality of a journey that stretched human endurance beyond imagining. From Troy's conquered shores, commanding 12 proud ships, Odysseus first descends upon the Ciconian lands. This brief campaign, initially victorious before turning catastrophic, serves as a bridge between worlds. From the martial glory of the Iliad to the more complex moral landscape of the Odyssey, his men fall into familiar patterns of conquest, plundering wealth, slaughtering men, claiming women as prizes, the accepted currency of ancient warfare. With characteristic foresight, Odysseus urges swift retreat, but his men, drunk on victory and wine, ignore his counsel. They feast carelessly on the beach, weapons set aside, vigilance abandoned. When Ciconian reinforcements surge down from the hills like a human tide, the Greeks pay dearly. 6 warriors lost from each vessel before the surviving crews can escape to open water. This small tragedy foreshadows the greater losses to come, and establishes the fatal pattern. Odysseus counsels wisdom. His men choose folly. Death collects its due. Their journey takes a haunting turn as winds drive them to the shores of the Lotus-eaters, where an innocent-looking flower conceals a terrifying power. The scouts Odysseus sends ashore return as hollow echoes of themselves, their minds wiped clean of purpose, all longing for home dissolved in the sweet poison of forgetfulness. With pleading eyes, these men beg only to remain forever in their newfound bliss. Recognizing this threat as more insidious than any monster, Odysseus physically drags his affected companions back to the ships, binding them beneath the rowing benches, and commands immediate departure with urgent haste. Though the Lotus-eaters bear no weapons, their offering cuts deeper than the sharpest blade, the gift of oblivion, the surrender of self, the abandonment of purpose. This brief encounter crystallizes a theme that pulses throughout Odysseus's Odyssey, the seductive whisper of forgetfulness against the painful necessity of remembrance. At each crossroad, Odysseus chooses the thornier path leading homeward, refusing each siren call of surrender that would ease his suffering but erase his identity. Fortune abandons them entirely at their next landing, on craggy shores, where Cyclopes dwell, solitary giants who mock both law and community. Odysseus leads 12 chosen men to explore a cavern overflowing with cheese and milk. His companions, instincts prickling with warning, urge him to take provisions and flee. But Odysseus, driven by that fatal curiosity and hope for guest gifts, insists on meeting the cave's master. When Polyphemus thunders into his home, driving bleeding flocks before him, his true nature emerges as monstrous as his form is massive. "We care nothing for Zeus or the blessed gods," he snarls, contempt dripping from each word as Odysseus invokes sacred hospitality. Without hesitation, the giant seizes to Greeks, shatters their skulls against the stone floor, and tears them limb from bloody limb, devouring them raw as his visitors watch in horror. He then seals their prison, rolling a boulder across the cave mouth so massive that 20 wagons could not budge it, before settling into peaceful slumber, anticipating more human flesh for his morning feast. Trapped within this living nightmare, Odysseus confronts the ultimate test of his defining quality, metas, that cunning intelligence that separates man from beast. Brute force offers no salvation. The boulder blocks escape, and direct combat against the giant would mean certain annihilation. Odysseus must transform his mind into the only weapon that matters. His stratagem unfolds with the precision of a master craftsman. First, he offers Polyphemus potent wine, undiluted by water, each deep draught loosening the monster's caution like a slowly untied knot. When the intoxicated giant inquires his name, Odysseus delivers his masterstroke. Autus nobody a response, both deceptively truthful and brilliantly false. Then, as Polyphemus collapses into wine-soaked oblivion, Odysseus and his men transform an olive wood stake into a fire-hardened spear and drive it deep into the Cyclops' single eye. With the combined force of shipwrights boring through timber, the sizzling sound of flesh giving way beneath the hot point echoing through the cave. Polyphemus's agonized roar summons other Cyclopes to his cave, but when they call through the stone barrier asking who harms him, he can only bellow, "Nobody is killing me by craft, not force." Taking his words at face value, they depart, muttering about madness or divine punishment. Odysseus has weaponized language itself, exploiting the ambiguity between identity and absence to escape immediate retribution. To escape the cave, the Greeks execute a plan of beautiful simplicity. They cling to the undersides of Polyphemus's massive sheep as he releases them to pasture, hidden among the dense wool where the blind giant can only feel along their backs with searching hands. This escape showcases Odysseus's tactical brilliance, finding the one path where the monster's remaining senses cannot detect them. Yet, at the moment of apparent triumph, Odysseus succumbs to his fatal flaw. Safe aboard his ship, pulling away from shore, he cannot resist the urge to claim his victory, to mock his defeated enemy, and most crucially, to reveal his true identity. If any mortal asks, "Who blinded you?" he shouts across the narrowing water, "Tell them it was Odysseus, sacker of cities, son of Laertes, whose home is Ithaca." This moment of hubris transforms tactical victory into strategic catastrophe. Polyphemus, now armed with his attacker's name, raises his arms to the sky and prays to his father, Poseidon, god of earthquakes and seas, for vengeance. The sea god hears his Cyclops son's plea, setting in motion divine enmity that will cost Odysseus all his ships, all his loyal men, and nearly a decade of wandering before he can reclaim his home. The Cyclops episode ripples with symbolic dimensions. Polyphemus represents pre-civilized existence, a world without agriculture, laws, assembly, or ships. His single eye suggests limited perspective, unable to perceive depth or complexity. His isolated existence runs contrary to Greek ideals of the polis and community. By blinding him, Odysseus asserts the superiority of civilization, strategy, and collective action over solitary brute force. Yet, the encounter also reveals Odysseus's fatal flaw, the pride in his own cleverness that compels him to claim credit for his deed. The very name he has spent the epic trying to live up to return to, becomes the curse that extends his exile. Identity proves both essential and dangerous, a double-edged sword that cuts both ways. After escaping Polyphemus, Odysseus's fleet reaches the floating island of Aeolus, master of winds. This divine host treats them with generous hospitality for a month, then provides supernatural assistance for their homeward journey. A leather bag containing all contrary winds tightly bound, leaving only the gentle westerly breeze free to blow them straight to Ithaca. For 9 days, Odysseus personally mans the sheet, refusing sleep as they sail ever homeward. Success lies literally within sight. They draw close enough to Ithaca to see smoke rising from hearth fires on shore. At this pivotal moment, when salvation seems certain, exhaustion finally conquers the hero, and he slips into deep slumber. His men, harboring long suspicions about the mysterious bag which Odysseus has guarded so jealously, see their opportunity. Convinced it contains treasure their leader intends to keep for himself, they untie it while he sleeps. The captive winds explode outward with hurricane force, creating a devastating storm that blows the fleet back across the vast sea to Aeolus's island. When Odysseus returns to beg for further help, Aeolus recoils in horror and disgust. Any man so clearly marked by the god's hatred, he reasons, deserves no assistance from the wise. This second rejection by Aeolus, refusing even to hear Odysseus's desperate plea, reveals how one failure of trust compounds into greater isolation. The episode reinforces the cruel pattern of nearly achieving home only to face renewed exile. It also illuminates the fatal dynamic between Odysseus and his men, his secrecy breeding their suspicion, their impulsiveness undermining his strategy. Neither fully trusts the other, creating a cycle of misunderstanding with increasingly tragic consequences. 6 days of grueling rowing brings the weary fleet to the land of the Lastrygonians, a race of giant cannibals more terrible than the Cyclops. Odysseus prudently keeps his own ship outside the harbor while sending scouts ahead. This caution saves him but cannot protect the rest of the fleet. The Lastrygonians destroy 11 ships and devour their crew's hull, spearing the men like fish and carrying them off for their grisly feast. Only Odysseus's ship escapes the massacre. In a single blood-soaked moment, he has gone from commanding hundreds of men to just dozens, his responsibility both diminished and intensified by this catastrophic loss. The swift, brutal destruction of nearly his entire expedition marks the darkest point of his journey and sets the stage for the extended interlude on Circe's island that follows. With one ship and a crew trembling with desperation, Odysseus lands on Ia realm of the enchantress Circe. Dividing his remaining men into 2 groups, he sends the first, led by his kinsman Eurylochus, to explore. They discover a palace surrounded by docile lions and wolves beasts, transformed by Circe's magic into unnatural tameness. Inside, the goddess welcomes them with a feast secretly laced with enchanted ingredients. After they eat, she touches them with her wand, transforming all but Eurylochus, who had remained watchful outside, into swine, their human minds trapped within animal bodies, a living metaphor for men who surrender reason to appetite. When Eurylochus returns with news of this horror, Odysseus sets out alone to confront the goddess. On his way, he encounters Hermes, swift messenger of the gods, who provides both a magical herb called moly to protect against Circe's spells and precise instructions for subduing her. Following this divine guidance, Odysseus consumes the herb, resists the enchantress's magic when she strikes him with her wand, and draws his sword against her, compelling her to swear a binding oath not to harm him or plot further mischief. This confrontation transforms into an extended stay on Ia Circe, restores the men to human form, hosts the crew for a full year of feasting and pleasure, and becomes Odysseus's lover. This interlude of comfort and sensual delight seems to make the crew forget their homeward mission entirely, as days blur into months of easy living. Only when his men finally confront him, appealing to his desire for home, does Odysseus approach Circe about departure. Her response introduces the next essential challenge on his journey. Before they can return home, she tells them they must journey to the land of the dead to consult the blind prophet Tiresias. This requirement for Catabasis' descent to the underworld marks a crucial spiritual dimension of Odysseus' journey. To move forward toward life and home, he must first go deeper into darkness, confronting death itself and the shadows of his past deeds and losses. Following Circe's detailed instructions, Odysseus ventures to the world's western edge, where eternal darkness reigns and underworld rivers merge with the ocean. There, he performs ancient rituals with methodical precision, excavating a pit in the shadowy earth, pouring sacred libations, sacrificing animals, and allowing their dark blood to pool an irresistible beacon for the spirits of the dead. As ghostly shades materialize from the mist, drawn by the crimson offering, Odysseus stands guard with drawn sword, keeping the hungry spirits at bay until Tiresias arrives. The revered blind prophet approaches, drinks deeply from the sacrificial blood, and his voice resonates with supernatural clarity as he unveils Odysseus's fate. He issues 3 critical prophecies: a warning about the sacred cattle of Helios on Thrinacia that could doom the entire expedition, confirmation of Odysseus's eventual return to Ithaca and the violent reckoning with the suitors, and a mysterious final journey inland, carrying an oar until he reaches people so removed from maritime life they mistake it for a winnowing fan. His prophecy delivered, Odysseus allows other spirits to approach the life-giving blood. Among these shades appears Anticlea, Odysseus's mother live when he departed for Troy, but now a resident of the underworld, having perished from grief during his prolonged absence. In one of the epic's most heart-wrenching moments, her shade attempts 3 times to embrace her son, but passes through his outstretched arms like mourning mist, a poignant illustration of the insurmountable barrier between life and death. Odysseus also encounters a procession of legendary women and fallen comrades from the Trojan campaign. Agamemnon's spirit delivers a chilling warning born from his own tragic end, murdered by his wife, Clytemnestra, and her lover upon his homecoming. He urges Odysseus to return to Ithaca in absolute secrecy, trusting no one, not even Penelope. Achilles, once the embodiment of glory-seeking heroism in life, now utters perhaps the epic's most haunting reflection. I would rather be a hired laborer on earth, serving a man of little property, than rule over all the dead. Most wrenching is Odysseus's encounter with Ajax's unyielding spirit, who committed suicide after losing to Odysseus in the contest for Achilles' armor. Despite earnest appeals, Ajax maintains his bitter silence, his unspoken grudge transcending even death itself, sobering reminder of how Odysseus's competitive brilliance has left lasting scars on others. These ghostly encounters reveal the profound human cost of Odysseus's victories. The underworld sequence serves as both narrative pivot and psychological depth, providing Odysseus crucial intelligence for his journey home, while forcing him to confront the consequences of his past. This metaphysical dimension suggests that true homecoming requires reconciliation, not just with geographical distance, but with death, memory, and the spectral weight of one's actions. Upon returning to Circe provides Odysseus with precise instructions for navigating the 3 remaining trials ahead. The Sirens, with their irresistible, fatal song, the passage between Scylla and Charybdis, a impossible choice between certain death for some or potential doom for all, and Thrinacia Island, with its sacred cattle of Helios, which must remain untouched despite any hunger or desperation. With strategic brilliance, Odysseus crafts specific countermeasures for each challenge. For the Sirens, he devises an ingenious compromise, having his men plug their ears with beeswax, while he experiences their legendary song bound firmly to the mast, unable to surrender to its deadly allure. This iconic image, the bound hero straining against his restraints as unearthly voices wash over him, crystallizes Odysseus's exceptional nature. He alone tastes what would destroy ordinary men, surviving through an extraordinary blend of foresight, discipline, and willingness to accept temporary constraint. The content of the Siren's song proves remarkably revealing. Rather than promising sensual pleasure, they tempt Odysseus with unlimited knowledge. We know all that happens on the fertile earth. Their appeal targets his defining trait, intellectual curiosity and hunger for understanding, the double-edged gift that has fueled both his greatest triumphs and costliest errors. in experiencing their song while denying himself the fatal approach to their island. Odysseus achieves a rare equilibrium between experience and restraint. Next follows the journey's most excruciating decision. To continue homeward, the ship must navigate either through the narrow strait where the six-headed monster Scylla lurks, or risk the catastrophic whirlpool Charybdis. Following Circe's counsel, better to lose 6 men than the entire crew, Odysseus makes the brutal calculation. He accepts this terrible arithmetic of leadership, but initially shields his men from the knowledge that some must inevitably perish regardless of his skill. Later, swept back past these twin terrors, he barely escapes being devoured by the whirlpool, clinging desperately to a fig tree growing from the cliff until his makeshift raft resurfaces in the churning waters. 9 days adrift at sea delivers him finally to Ogygia, Calypso's island, completing the circular narrative. From this nadir bereft of men, ship, and seemingly hope itself, we have already witnessed his eventual divine-assisted escape and arrival among the Phaeacians. As Odysseus concludes his epic tale, profound silence envelops the Phaeacian hall. This extended first-person account reveals dimensions of the hero invisible from external observation. His decision-making process, emotional responses to devastating loss, moments of both tactical brilliance and grave misjudgment. By allowing Odysseus to narrate his own Odyssey, Homer grants him agency in forging his identity through storytelling, just as he must reconstruct his identity through action upon returning to Ithaca. The Wanderings Odysseus describes map not merely geographical territory, but moral and psychological landscapes. Each adventure tests specific facets of human nature: the seduction of forgetfulness among the Lotus Eaters, the tension between civilization and savage instinct with the Cyclops, the delicate balance of trust and suspicion with Iolaus and his crew, the temptation of endless pleasure and stasis with Circe, the dangerous allure of forbidden knowledge with the Sirens, the impossible choices between types of sacrifice with Scylla and Charybdis, and the desperate rationalizations that lead to catastrophic transgression with Helios's cattle. These episodes weave together into a tapestry of human experience, illuminating the boundaries of our capabilities and the heights of our ambitions. Through Odysseus, we see not the flawless champion of legend, nor a helpless plaything of capricious gods, but rather a mortal man confronting impossible odds with remarkably imperfect abilities. When his companions fall one by one, his continued survival springs from a potent blend: divine blessing, personal brilliance, and the fickle smile of fortune. 3 forces the ancient Greeks understood as the pillars supporting human destiny, as the Phaeacians, miraculous vessels, described as swift as thought itself, prepare to carry Odysseus to his longed-for Ithaca. The Wanderer's saga gives way to the homecoming tale. Before him stretches a challenge greater than any monster or enchantress. Reclaiming his rightful place in the human realm, he departed 2 decades earlier. The crucible of his Odyssey, the wisdom gained, the resilience forged, the determination hardened faces its ultimate test within the intricate web of relationships and expectations awaiting him in Ithaca. It is there, among those who once knew him, that the definitive question of his identity must be answered, no longer as adventurer or tale spinner, but in his essential roles as husband, father, and sovereign. Part 4. Homecoming. The king in disguise. Home, the Phaeacians deliver on their promise. Their miraculous ship carries the sleeping Odysseus across the sea to Ithaca, where they gently place him and his newfound treasures on the shore before departing. When Odysseus awakens, he finds himself surrounded by morning mist, unable to recognize the very homeland he has struggled so long to reach. This moment of disorientation captures a profound truth about homecoming after prolonged absence. Places change. Memory proves unreliable. The returning traveler must reconcile the home of imagination with the reality that confronts them. For Odysseus, this reconciliation begins with uncertainty bordering on despair. Has he been deceived, abandoned on some strange shore with his gifts? Athena appears, first disguised as a young shepherd, then revealing herself to her favorite mortal. Their exchange highlights their special relationship, a blend of divine patronage and mutual respect. When Athena asks why he doesn't immediately recognize his homeland, Odysseus initially responds with caution, creating a false tale about his identity. The goddess smiles at this reflexive deception, noting with approval that anyone who matched Odysseus in craft would need to be a champion deceiver. Together, they hide his treasures in a nearby cave. Then Athena transforms him into an aged beggar, stooping his posture, wrinkling his skin, clouding his bright eyes, and clothing him in rags. This disguise serves multiple purposes. Practically, it protects him from the suitors who would kill him on sight. Strategically, it allows him to observe the situation in his palace, unrecognized, testing loyalties before revealing himself. Symbolically, it represents his liminal status, physically present in Ithaca, but not yet restored to his proper identity and position. Athena, meanwhile, departs for Sparta to retrieve Telemachus, who has lingered perhaps too long, enjoying Menelaus's hospitality. The young man, warned through a dream of the suitor's ambush, begins his journey homeward alongside the synchronized return of his father. This is one of several carefully constructed parallel movements that characterize the epic's later books. Disguised as a beggar, Odysseus seeks out the dwelling of his swineherd, Eumaeus. Following Athena's guidance, this humble hut, far from the corrupted splendor of the palace, becomes the staging ground for the eventual reclamation of his kingdom. Here, Odysseus encounters the first example of unwavering loyalty among his servants. Despite his ragged appearance, Eumaeus welcomes the stranger with every hospitality. His modest means allow sharing food, providing shelter, and treating him with dignity. This warm reception contrasts sharply with the treatment Odysseus will later receive from the suitors, highlighting one of the epic's central themes. True nobility manifests in behavior rather than birth or wealth. Eumaeus, though a slave, embodies the ethical code that the high-born suitors violate. His hospitality toward a seeming beggar reveals more genuine aristocratic values than the destructive entitlement of those occupying the palace. Over a simple meal, the disguised Odysseus and Eumaeus exchange stories. Odysseus creates an elaborate false tale about his identity, claiming to be a Cretan warrior who fought at Troy, suffered many misadventures, and eventually heard news of Odysseus preparing to return home. This embedded narrative showcases the hero's improvisational genius while revealing how he gathers information without exposing himself. Eumaeus responds with skepticism about the news of his master's imminent return. He has heard too many false reports from travelers seeking advantage, but shares his own life story. He reveals he was born a prince, kidnapped by Phoenician traders with the help of a treacherous nursemaid, and eventually purchased by Laertes, Odysseus's father. This narrative creates a poignant counterpoint. The nobleman living as a slave speaks with the king disguised as a beggar, each temporarily separated from his true status. For several days, Odysseus remains with Eumaeus, learning about conditions in Ithaca and observing the swineherd's steadfast character. This interlude in the countryside allows Homer to develop a fuller picture of Ithaca beyond the palace walls, showing how Odysseus's prolonged absence has affected the broader community and economy of his kingdom. Through conversations with Eumaeus, and later with other characters, Odysseus learns how his herds have been depleted, how different servants have responded to the crisis, and how the political situation has deteriorated in his absence. The tranquility of the swineherd's hut is broken by the arrival of Telemachus, who has successfully evaded the suitors' sea ambush. Following Athena's instructions, he has landed in a remote part of Ithaca and made his way directly to Eumaeus, rather than returning to the palace. This caution demonstrates his growing maturity, a stark contrast to the naive youth who departed weeks earlier. When Eumaeus leaves to bring news of Telemachus's safe return to Penelope, Athena appears, visible only to Odysseus, instructing him to reveal himself to his son. With a touch of her wand, she temporarily restores his true appearance. The disguise falls away, and Odysseus stands before his son in his actual form, strong, handsome, regal. Telemachus's reaction reveals both the emotional power and potential danger of this moment. Initially believing the transformation indicates a god in disguise, he averts his eyes, declaring, "Just now you were old and shabbily clothed, but now you are like the gods who rule the wide heavens." When Odysseus identifies himself as his long-lost father, Telemachus remains doubtful. "You cannot be my father, Odysseus. Some god is deceiving me to make my grief even more painful." This resistance to recognition, the fear of false hope after so many years of disappointment, makes their eventual embrace all the more powerful. When the full realization finally comes, both men weep openly. Homer compares their crying to the keening of eagles whose nestlings have been stolen. Rare simile, likening human emotion to the animal world rather than the reverse, emphasizing the primal nature of their reconnection. Once the initial surge of emotion subsides, father and son begin plotting the suitor's destruction. This immediate transition from reunion to conspiracy emphasizes the context of their relationship, not a peaceful homecoming, but a preparation for necessary violence. Odysseus outlines his strategy, counting the suitors' numbers, assessing potential allies, and instructing Telemachus on his role in the coming confrontation. Despite 20 years of separation, they quickly establish a working partnership based on their shared goal and complementary skills. Odysseus resumes his beggar disguise before Eumaeus returns, maintaining the deception for all except his son. Together they prepare to enter the palace Telemachus first to avoid suspicion, with the disguised Odysseus to follow later as a seemingly random beggar seeking charity. This approach will allow Odysseus to observe the situation firsthand, while positioning himself for the eventual attack. Before this plan unfolds, Homer provides a touching counterpoint with the story of Argos, Odysseus's faithful hound. Once celebrated for his unmatched speed and keen hunting prowess, Argos now lies abandoned on a heap of dung, his body ravaged by age, plagued by parasites, forsaken by all. Yet, as Odysseus passes by in his beggar's disguise that had fooled every human eye, the old dog's senses awaken to a truth his heart never forgot. With the last flicker of his fading strength, Argos lifts his tail in joyful recognition and lowers his ears in greeting. Having fulfilled his final purpose-bearing witness to his master's return, the loyal companion breathes his last. This fleeting yet devastating scene resonates with profound significance. It provides Odysseus a moment of pure, uncomplicated recognition amidst a world of suspicion and deception. The neglected dog becomes a living metaphor for Odysseus's crumbling household, while simultaneously reminding us that even the most steadfast loyalty ultimately yields to time's relentless passage. Perhaps most stirring is how this scene illustrates that love penetrates disguises that reason cannot breach, a theme echoed later when the elderly nurse, while calculated intellect fails to pierce Odysseus's facade, instinctive devotion sees through to the essential truth. As Telemachus returns to the palace and reunites with his mother, who embraces him with relief, yet remains ignorant of the momentous transformation underway, Eunice guides the disguised Odysseus toward the home he once ruled. There he will witness firsthand the disorder that has consumed his domain during his absence. Their journey to the palace reveals another facet of Odysseus's fractured household when they encounter the goatherd, Melanthius. Unlike the faithful Eumaeus, Melanius has allied himself with the suitors. Illuminates the spectrum of loyalty and betrayal Odysseus must navigate within his own household. Upon entering his palace as a beggar, Odysseus endures the ultimate humiliation of his long journey, becoming a target for entertainment and cruelty in the very halls he once commanded. The suitors, particularly their ringleader Antinous, treat him with calculated malice. When Odysseus humbly requests food, Antinous responds by hurling a footstool, striking the disguised king in the back. This brutal act crystallizes the moral corruption of the suitors, not merely their consumption of Odysseus's resources, but their violation of the sacred duty to treat strangers and supplicants with dignity. Beneath his outward patience, Odysseus harbors smoldering fury. Each insult compounds the righteous anger that will eventually erupt in bloody vengeance. Yet his extraordinary self-restraint, the same quality that enabled him to endure Polyphemus's cave and Calypso's island, allows him to maintain his disguise despite overwhelming provocation. Not everyone in the palace mirrors the suitor's contempt. Penelope, hearing of both the stranger's arrival and the abuse he suffered, summons him to inquire whether he has news of Odysseus. Their conversation with the queen, unknowingly addressing her own husband's dramatic irony of exquisite intensity, claiming to have hosted the real Odysseus years earlier and offering carefully detailed predictions about his imminent return. This extended exchange between disguised husband and questioning wife explores the paradox of intimate estrangement. They sit mere inches apart, physically close yet divided by layers of deception and uncertainty. Odysseus must suppress his longing to reveal himself, while Penelope balances the fragile hope kindled by the stranger's convincing account against the caution born from years of crushed expectations. Their interaction unveils new dimensions of Penelope's character, her sharp intelligence, diplomatic skill in extracting information, and emotional resilience. When the disguised Odysseus accurately describes clothing and companions from 20 years past, the barriers to recognition transcend physical disguise. They include the psychological armor she has constructed against false hope. Their exchange also establishes the mechanism for Odysseus's ultimate triumph. Penelope announces her intention to challenge the suitors. Whoever can string Odysseus's mighty bow and shoot an arrow through 12 axe handles will win her hand. This contest impossible for any man save Odysseus himself, becomes the perfect instrument for the approaching reckoning. One final recognition scene unfolds before the contest when the aged nurse Euryclea bathes the disguised Odysseus's feet and discovers a distinctive scar on his thigh wound, received during a youthful boar hunt. Unlike Argos's silent acknowledgement, this moment threatens to expose Odysseus prematurely. He seizes her throat to prevent her exclamation, commanding her to keep his identity secret, even from Penelope herself. This pattern of partial recognition reveals a profound truth. Those with least social power often perceive reality most clearly. The dog, the nurse, and the swineherd all recognize aspects of Odysseus that remain invisible to those of higher stations. Their loyalty springs not from social obligation, but from genuine devotion, making them essential allies in the coming restoration. As the fateful day of the contest approaches, supernatural signs multiply. Zeus sends thunder from a cloudless sky. Theoclymenus, a seer who has sought refuge with Telemachus, experiences a horrific vision. The suitors, surrounded by blood-dripping walls, ghostly figures, and darkening sunlight, a premonition of impending slaughter that the suitors dismiss with mocking laughter. These supernatural omens aren't merely dramatic flourishes. They establish the moral framework for the bloodshed to come. The suitors' impending doom transcends personal vengeance. It manifests as divine justice, the inevitable consequence of their brazen violations against home, hospitality, and sacred social order. When Odysseus finally strings the bow and releases his first deadly arrow, he serves as an instrument of cosmic realignment, mortal hand, guided by immortal purpose. The masterfully orchestrated sequence of Odysseus's disguised reconnaissances journey from rustic countryside to opulent palace, his encounters with servants, both loyal and treacherous, his observations from dog to nurse to wifeful, fills multiple narrative functions. Beyond building exquisite tension, this extended deception creates unbearable suspense, delaying yet enhancing the inevitable confrontation. This disguised infiltration allows Homer to paint a vivid, multifaceted portrait of how Ithaca has transformed during its king's absence. More crucially, it establishes the moral imperative for the approaching violence, revealing layer by layer the depth of corruption that necessitates such a thorough and bloody purification. Through these scenes, Odysseus's disguise transcends mere tactical advantage. It becomes a profound metaphor for his liminal existence, physically present yet socially invisible, inhabiting the margins of his own kingdom. This vantage point grants him unprecedented insight, allowing him to witness his realm through the unfiltered perspective of its most vulnerable members. This experience transforms him, deepening his understanding of loyalty, power, and justice beyond anything his years of acknowledged kingship could have taught. His beggar's rags connect him to ancient patterns in Greek heroic tradition, where disguise invariably precedes revelation, suffering precedes triumph, and descent precedes glorious, ascent-echoing mythic journeys, like Demeter searching for Persephone or Dionysus testing his followers. Through concealment, Odysseus conducts a profound test of character, distinguishing between those who recognize essential worth beneath superficial appearance and those who judge solely by external trappings. As the fateful day of the bow contest arrives, all players have assumed their positions in the unfolding drama. Penelope, unwittingly brilliant, has established the perfect mechanism for selecting among the suitors. Telemachus has positioned himself as his father's steadfast ally, while maintaining a calculated facade of neutrality. Eumaeus and the loyal cowherd Philoetius, now secret conspirators, stand ready for the signal to act. The suitors, blinded by arrogance, continue their revelry, oblivious to the gathering storm. And at the center, Odysseus himself, outwardly wrapped in beggar's rags, but inwardly coiled for action, watches with predatory patience, awaiting the perfect moment to shed his disguise and reclaim his name, his hearth, and his throne. His epic journey across treacherous seas has ended, but the most perilous crossing lies directly before him. The transformation from shadow to substance, from disguised observer to avenging king, from absence to presence in the fullest, most terrible sense. Part 5. The reckoning justice comes with arrows. The great hall falls silent. Penelope, still unaware of her husband's true identity, announces the contest that will decide her fate. Odysseus's mighty bow will be brought forth. Whoever can string it and shoot an arrow through 12 perfectly aligned axe heads will win her hand. The bow itself is no ordinary weapon, a gift from Iphitus, later slain by Heracles. It embodies Odysseus's warrior spirit. For 20 years it has remained untouched, wrapped and stored away just as its master's true identity has been concealed. Now it emerges as both test and weapon of retribution. When faithful Eumaeus carries the bow into the hall, he cannot contain his emotion. Tears stream down his weathered face at the sight of his master's weapon. Beside him, the loyal cowherd Philoetius also weeps openly. The arrogant suitors mock their sentiment, blind to the significance of these tears, and unaware that these servants have already pledged themselves to the coming vengeance. The challenge immediately proves impossible. Even the strongest young suitors cannot bend the massive bow enough to string it. From his position of seeming insignificance, the disguised Odysseus studies each man intently, noting strengths, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities of predator, assessing his prey. Antinous, sensing their collective failure, suggests postponing the contest. Today is Apollo's festival, he declares, his voice betraying his wounded pride. The god of archery might be offended by our competition. This transparent excuse reveals the suitors' growing awareness of their inadequacy. They who presume to replace Odysseus cannot even wield his weapon. In this pivotal moment, the disguised king approaches Telemachus, communicating through subtle glances and gestures that he should be allowed to try the bow. Understanding his father's intent, Telemachus asserts his authority. The bow is mine to give, and if I wish the stranger to try it, that is my right. Despite vehement objections from the suitors, Telemachus commands Eumaeus to place the weapon in the beggar's hands. The moment the bow touches Odysseus's palms, a transformation begins. Homer describes with exquisite detail how the beggar examines the weapon with practiced expertise, checking for worm damage, testing its flexibility with the precision of a musician tuning a treasured lyre. This casual display of mastery offers the first public glimpse of his true identity. With fluid ease that stuns the onlookers, Odysseus strings the bow that defeated all others. The string tightens with a musical twang that echoes through the hall like a swallow's note. Taking a single arrow from the quiver, he sights along its shaft with a hunter's eye, then releases. The arrow flies straight through all 12 axe handles without the slightest deviation. The hall falls into stunned silence at this impossible feat. In the breathless quiet that follows, Odysseus exchanges a meaningful glance with Telemachus. The young prince immediately girds himself with sword and spear, taking position at his father's side. Only then does Odysseus cast off the final elements of his disguise. Standing tall on the threshold of his hala symbolically charged position, connecting different domains, he declares his true purpose. That contest is ended. Now I set my aim at another target that no man has yet hit, before anyone can react. He looses an arrow directly into Antinous' throat as the suitor lifts a golden wine cup to his lips. The leader of the suitors falls backward with terrible force. Blood spurts from his nostrils as his legs convulse, kicking over the table and sending food crashing across the floor. His wine cup tumbles from lifeless fingers. This graphic detail, the feast becoming bloodied, celebration transforming instantly to slaughter marks, the shocking transition from revelry to retribution. Confusion grips the remaining suitors. They believe the killing must be accidentally. What beggar would deliberately murder a nobleman? Only when Odysseus finally proclaims his true identity does the horrifying reality dawn on them. "You dogs," he thunders, his voice no longer that of a humble beggar, but of a vengeful king. "You never thought I would return from Troy. You devoured my household, forced yourselves on my serving women, and courted my wife, while I still lived, fearing neither the gods nor human retribution. Now death's cords have fallen upon you all." This declaration elevates the violence from mere revenge to divine justice, the restoration of sacred order against those who violated every social boundary. Odysseus stands not merely as an aggrieved husband, but as an instrument of cosmic realignment. Eurymachus, desperately seeking escape, offers extravagant compensation restitution for everything consumed, plus 20 oxen from each suitor. Odysseus rejects this belated offer with cold finality. No payment can atone for their transgressions. Only blood will suffice. His refusal illuminates the moral economy of the epic. Some violations transcend material compensation and demand the ultimate price. Realizing negotiation has failed, the suitors draw their swords and search frantically for shields. But Telemachus, following his father's earlier instructions, has already removed the armor from the hall. Eurymachus charges in desperate attack, but falls with an arrow piercing his liver. Amphinomus rushes forward next, only to be speared through the back by Telemachus. What follows is not chaotic battle, but methodical execution. Odysseus continues, firing arrows with deadly precision until his quiver empties, dropping suitors with each shot. Telemachus retrieves additional weapons for his father, himself, and the loyal servants who have joined their cause. The doors are secured, trapping the remaining suitors inside like animals in a pen. The fighting intensifies as the outnumbered attackers face the desperate suitors. Athena appears in the form of mentor to encourage Odysseus, though she does not immediately grant victory. Instead, she tests the aging hero's strength and courage before finally intervening more directly. This divine restraint emphasizes that even with godly favor, human effort remains essential to justice. Homer does not glorify the violence, but renders it with unflinching detail. Men fall with spears through their throats, swords piercing their chests, skulls cleaved by bronze blades. The floor runs with blood. Men slip in gore as they try to flee. The hall echoes with death groans and the thud of falling bodies. This graphic depiction underscores the gravity of the suitors' transgressions, their years of pleasant parasitism culminating in horrific consequences. The battle reaches its climax when Odysseus and his small band face the remaining suitors, led by Agelaus. Athena finally displays her aegis, the fearsome shield, bearing the Gorgon's head from the rafters, filling the suitors with supernatural terror. Like cattle driven by stinging flies, they scatter in panic, only to be cut down one by one. Homer employs recurring similes of hunted animals. The suitors become like fish gasping on shore, like doves caught in a net, emphasizing their sudden transformation from predators to prey. Mercy comes for only two individuals. The bard Phemius, who had entertained the suitors under compulsion, begs for his life, claiming he served in the palace unwillingly. Similarly, the herald Medon, who had shown kindness to Telemachus, pleads for clemency. Telemachus intercedes for both, demonstrating wisdom amid the bloodshed and establishing himself as a worthy ethical heir to his father. When the fighting ends, the hall resembles a shoreline after a bloody tide, littered with corpses like fish strewn across sand. Odysseus, spattered with blood and gore, like a lion that has feasted on an ox, orders the disloyal serving women to clean the hall under Telemachus's supervision. These women, 12 in number, who had slept with the suitors and betrayed the household, are then taken outside and hanged in a grim extension of the purge. The treacherous goatherd Melanius, who had mocked and abused the disguised Odysseus and helped arm the suitors during the battle, meets an even more terrible fate. Melanius faces an even more horrific fate. The betrayer's body becomes a canvas for vengeance, as his nose, ears, hands, and feet are severed, his genitals cast to hungry dogs, a brutal dismemberment that physically manifests the enormity of his treachery. Following this grim retribution, Odysseus commands the hall be purified with burning sulfur, a ritual that serves dual purposes: the practical cleansing of death's stench and the symbolic purification of a sacred space. The great hall, defiled by years of the suitors' debauchery, must be ceremonially reclaimed before the rhythm of proper life can resume within its walls. Amid this aftermath of carnage, a moment of profound tenderness emerges. Euryclea, the faithful nurse who first recognized her master by his scar, gathers the loyal serving women to greet their returned king. They surround Odysseus with tearful joy, pressing kisses to his head and hands, embracing him with the fervor of those whose faith has finally been rewarded. This poignant reunion, amidst the lingering shadows of bloodshed, creates a powerful emotional contrast. The restoration of right order brings not merely justice's cold satisfaction, but the warm reconnection with those whose loyalty never wavered during the long years of absence. Yet for all its cathartic violence and emotional reunions, this cleansing represents only a partial restoration. Odysseus has reclaimed his physical domain and eliminated those who threatened it from within. But he has not yet reclaimed the heart of his kingdom, his marriage. When Euryclea hurries to her with news that Odysseus has returned and slaughtered the suitors, the queen's response is not immediate elation, but measured skepticism. Having armored her heart against disappointment for 20 long years, she cannot simply lay down these defenses at the first herald of hope. With characteristic caution, she suggests alternative explanations. Perhaps some deity struck down the suitors, or perhaps this stranger is someone else entirely, not her long-lost husband. This final resistance to recognition creates the framework for what becomes the epic's most psychologically nuanced and intimate encounter. After 20 years of separation, after reclaiming his household through bloodshed, Odysseus faces his most formidable challenge, convincing his brilliant, guarded wife that he has truly returned. The man who deceived a cyclops, outwitted a goddess, and survived the ocean's wrath must now navigate the equally treacherous waters of a heart that has learned to survive on caution and doubt. The bow contest and subsequent slaughter transform the epic from a tale of wandering to one of justice restored. These events fulfill Tiresias's prophecies and the divine will expressed since the poem's opening lines, yet they also raise profound questions about violence, retribution, and restoration that the final books must address. The bloodshed has cleansed the palace walls, but healing the fractured community, re-establishing political order, and truly reclaiming intimate relationships requires something beyond physical triumphs, something that violence alone, however justified, cannot provide. As darkness envelops the blood-cleansed hall, Odysseus stands victorious over his enemies, but poised on the threshold of his most meaningful homecoming. The reunion with the wife whose loyalty and intelligence have matched his own legendary qualities. This final recognition between husband and wife, between matched intellects, between souls separated but never truly parted awaits in the chambers above. Part 6. The Aftermath, Peace, and Memory. The palace stones breathe easier now. Blood no longer stains the floors where suitors fell. Their bodies, claimed by grieving kin, have been carried away. The faithless servants who betrayed their master's house have answered for their treachery. Yet one thread remains unwoven in this tapestry of homecoming. The most profound reunion between husband and wife awaits like a promise at dawn. Penelope descends from her chambers, her heart a battlefield of conflicting emotions. For 20 years, she has walked a tightrope between hope and despair, refusing both to accept her husband's death and to fully embrace the possibility of his return. This emotional fortitude, as remarkable as Odysseus' physical endurance, has been her shield and sanctuary. She approaches the great hall with measured steps, guarding herself against another disappointment. The stranger by the hearth bears little resemblance to the man who sailed away 2 decades ago. His body is cleansed of battle's evidence, wrapped in fresh garments, yet something in his bearing causes her heart to quicken. Despite Telemachus' frustrated insistence that this man is truly his father, Penelope remains steadfast in her caution. "My child," she tells her son with quiet dignity, "if he truly is Odysseus returned home, we will recognize each other beyond any doubt, for we share secrets known to no other living soul." This insistence on private confirmation reveals Penelope's profound wisdom. Throughout the epic, identities have proven fluid, and deceptive Odysseus himself has worn false personas like cloaks. Gods have walked in mortal disguise, and nothing has been quite as it seemed. Her skepticism mirrors her husband's own wariness, when aspects of the same strategic intelligence. Odysseus, though yearning for recognition, honors her prudence. When Telemachus bristles at his mother's apparent coldness, Odysseus calms him. "Let your mother test me as she will." This mutual respect for caution illuminates their profound compatibility, each recognizing in the other a mind that refuses to accept appearances without proof. With characteristic foresight, Odysseus arranges one final deception, not to trick his wife, but to protect their reunion. He orders music and dancing to echo through the palace, creating an illusion of celebration that will mask the aftermath of slaughter from any prying ears outside. Penelope sets her own trap with subtle brilliance. She instructs the servants to move the royal bed for this stranger command, designed to reveal truth. Odysseus' reaction is immediate and unfeigned. "Woman," he exclaims, genuine outrage coloring his voice. You pierce my heart. Who could move that bed? No man alive, even in the fullness of youth and strength, could shift it without destroying it. For I built that bed myself, and a great secret is woven into its making. With mounting emotion, he describes in intimate detail how he constructed their marriage bed around a living olive tree that grew within the palace walls, incorporating this immovable anchor into their most private chamber. The bed stands as the perfect metaphor for their marriage rooted in living earth, crafted with skill, built to endure beyond any absence. This revelation, this knowledge no impostor could possess, finally breaks through. Penelope's carefully constructed defenses, the secret of the bed, known only to them and a single trusted servant, provides the incontrovertible proof she sought. More than any scar or feat of arms, this intimate knowledge of their shared past confirms his identity. Emotion transforms her. Her knees weaken. Her heart melts like winter snow before spring's warmth. Tears flow freely down her face. The caution of 20 years dissolves in an instant as she runs to Odysseus, embracing him with desperate joy, pressing kisses to his head and face. "Do not be angry with me for holding back," she pleads, her voice breaking. "Always my heart feared deception, for many have plotted against us." Odysseus weeps in response, finally holding the woman whose memory sustained him through shipwreck, divine captivity, and endless wandering. Homer compares Penelope's welcome to the sight of land glimpsed by drowning sailors, the same powerful metaphor used when Odysseus first reached the Phaeacian shore. This deliberate echo suggests that physical salvation remained incomplete without emotional homecoming. Only now, recognized by the one who knows him most intimately, has Odysseus truly returned from his Odyssey. Their reunion extends through the night. They exchange stories, like precious gifts. Odysseus, recounting his wanderings in new detail. Penelope, describing her long resistance against the suitors, her clever delays, her battle against encroaching despair. This exchange transcends mere information. It represents the reweaving of their separate narratives into a single, shared history, bridging the 20-year chasm in their marriage. As they recognize each other's suffering and resilience, they reconstruct the foundation of their relationship. Dawn approaches, but Athena, divine patroness of their reunion, holds back the light, extending their night beyond natural limits. This supernatural intervention, manipulating time itself for their sake, underscores the cosmic significance of their bond. Their physical reunion represents not merely desire's fulfillment, but the restoration of proper order in both human and divine realms. Morning brings the sobering awareness that challenges remain. The slain suitors' families will demand blood price, threatening to plunge Ithaca into civil war. Odysseus must still visit his father, Laertes, who has retreated to a remote farm, living in self-imposed squalor as he mourns his missing son. And beyond these immediate concerns looms Tiresias's prophecy. Odysseus must eventually undertake another journey inland, carrying an oar until he reaches people who mistake it for a winnowing fan. The reunion with Laertes unfolds with heart-rending poignancy. Odysseus finds his father tending an orchard, dressed in patched clothing, his royal hands calloused from common labor grief made visible. Even here, Odysseus approaches revelation through testing, claiming to be a stranger who once hosted his son. This final deception proves unbearable for the old man. Hearing his son spoken of as still absent, Laertes pours dust over his gray head in ritualized mourning. The sight shatters Odysseus's resolve. He embraces his father, declaring his true identity and offering as proof his intimate knowledge of the orchard, naming each tree Laertes had given him as a boy, creating a living catalogue of their shared past. This scene, following the dramatic height of the suitor's slaughter and the emotional pinnacle of reunion with Penelope, reveals the epic's expansive vision of homecoming. The return is incomplete without this reconnection to Odysseus's father, the link to both heritage and future. 3 generations stand together: Laertes, Odysseus, and Telemachus, their unity across time, healing the wound of 20 years' absence. Meanwhile, news of the slaughter spreads through Ithaca like wildfire. Grief and rage consume the suitors' families as they perform funeral rites. Eupeithes, father of Antinous, emerges as vengeance's champion, rallying others to arms, despite moderate voices arguing that the suitors invited their own destruction. Civil conflict threatens to stain Odysseus's hard-won triumph with yet more bloodshed, as the vengeful contingent advances toward Laertes' farm, where Odysseus and his small band have gathered. The stage is set for yet another cycle of violence, the blood feud that ancient Greek society recognized as killing's almost inevitable aftermath. At this crucial moment, divine intervention shifts the balance. Zeus and Athena, conferring on Olympus, determine that enough blood has sanctified the earth of Ithaca. Athena descends to the nascent battlefield as combat begins. After allowing minimal fighting, including a moment of glory for aged Laertes, who fells Eupeithes with a well-cast spear, she halts the conflict with a thunderous command. Her divine authority, reinforced by Zeus's lightning, compels both sides to lay down their weapons. This divine imposition of peace provides transcendent resolution to what human nature would perpetuate as endless revenge. Homer acknowledges that mortal societies, left to their own devices, often remain trapped in retaliation's deadly logic. Divine intervention represents the higher principle necessary to break this cycle, perhaps foreshadowing the development of legal systems and third-party justice that would eventually replace blood vengeance in Greek society. Under Athena's watchful eye, a formal covenant is sealed between Odysseus and the families of the slain suitors. Disguised as Mentor, the goddess oversees the sacred oaths that bind both parties to peace. This political reconciliation perfectly complements the emotional reunifications with Penelope and Laertes, healing Ithaca on every level. Odysseus now stands fully restored, not merely to his household, but to his kingdom. Not simply to his family roles, but to his complete social identity. As the narrative draws to a close, tranquility blankets Ithaca once more. The natural order reasserts itself, with Odysseus reintegrated into every dimension of his being: husband, father, son, and king. This comprehensive restoration fulfills the profound promise of Nostos' homecoming that has pulsed through the narrative from its very first lines. Yet Homer, in his wisdom, leaves us with a tantalizing incompleteness to Odysseus's tale. The prophecy of blind Tiresias remains unfulfilled, that strange foretelling of a final journey inland, where Odysseus must carry an oar until he reaches people who mistake it for a winnowing fan. This unresolved destiny suggests that even the most perfect homecoming contains within it the seeds of future departure. Odysseus, the man of countless turns, may achieve stability, but never complete stillness. This deliberate open-endedness separates the Odyssey from tales of simple resolution. Having explored homecoming's intricate complexity, physical, emotional, social, and political facets, Homer acknowledges a profound truth. No return can be absolute or eternal. Even as Odysseus reclaims his rightful place at the center of expanding circles of connection, marriage, family, household, kingdom, the horizon of future journeys shimmers in the distance. In this exquisite tension between arrival and departure, between reunion and the inevitability of future separation, the epic discovers its enduring resonance. We recognize in Odysseus's story not merely the particular trials of an ancient hero, but the universal human condition of seeking home while acknowledging its impermanence, of cherishing connection, precisely because we understand its fragility. The final tableau of Athena establishing peace captures this delicate balance perfectly. Divine intervention creates what human effort alone could never achieve. Yet this celestial assistance comes in response to mortal struggle rather than supplanting it. The gods honor Odysseus's extraordinary perseverance by granting him the peace his own actions could not secure, completing what he initiated through 2 decades of relentless striving to return. In this harmonious collaboration between mortal determination and divine grace, between human agency and cosmic order, the Odyssey reveals its deepest significance. Odysseus's journey, at once physical and spiritual, geographical and emotional, charts the complete landscape of human experience against the backdrop of divine purpose. His homecoming transcends personal triumph to become a restoration of proper balance between mortal and immortal realms, a reharmonizing of a world thrown into chaos by war, absence, and transgression. As we leave Odysseus, finally at peace in Ithaca, recognized by all who truly matter to him, we understand why his saga has captivated humanity for 3 millennia. In his unyielding determination to return, in his willingness to endure extraordinary hardship rather than surrender his essential self, in his remarkable ability to adapt without losing his core identity, we glimpse the highest expression of human resilience. And in the profound joy of his homecoming, however dearly purchased, however shadowed by past suffering and future obligation, we recognize the incomparable reward that makes such resilience worthwhile. The irreplaceable experience of belonging, of being truly known, of finally coming home. Epilogue. The Odyssey's immortal journey, legacy, and influence, with Odysseus finally restored to his throne and peace settling over Ithaca like a gentle mist, Homer's narrative reaches its formal conclusion. Yet, for the Odyssey itself, this ending marked only the beginning of an extraordinary cultural voyage. Like its ingenious hero, this epic would navigate across 3 millennia, weathering the storms of changing civilizations while maintaining its essential character, a testament to storytelling's immortal power. The epic first took root in ancient Greek soil, where, alongside the Iliad, it flourished as more than mere entertainment. It became the cornerstone of cultural identity, a moral compass, historical archive, religious text, and educational foundation. Children's first literary encounters were with Homer's flowing hexameters. Communities gathered in rapt attention for public recitations that could last days. Statesmen bolstered arguments with Homeric quotations. In a landscape of independent city-states, often at odds with one another, these epics provided a shared cultural language that transcended political boundaries. As Greek influence expanded through Alexander's far-reaching conquests, and later through Roman adoption, Homer's narrative traveled with it, planting seeds in new cultural soils. The Romans, captivated by these tales, didn't merely preserve them, they transformed them into something distinctly Roman, Virgil's masterpiece. The Aeneid stands as testament to this creative inheritance, weaving Homeric structures and themes into a distinctly Roman tapestry that celebrated their national destiny. When darkness fell across much of Western Europe during the medieval period, countless ancient texts vanished into oblivion. Yet Homer's flame, though dimmed, never extinguished, while direct engagement with the original Greek waned in the West. The stories persisted through Latin adaptations and summaries. Meanwhile, in the Eastern Mediterranean, Byzantine scholars maintained an unbroken chain of Homeric scholarship, preserving the original texts with reverence and meticulous care. The Renaissance awakened with a hunger for classical wisdom, and Homer returned to Western consciousness with triumphant force. As precious Greek manuscripts journeyed westward following Constantinople's fall in 1453, scholars raced to produce new translations and commentaries. Homer once again became essential cultural currency, his influence flowing through the veins of Renaissance art, literature, and philosophical thought. Each subsequent era discovered in the Odyssey a mirror reflecting its own preoccupations and aspirations. During the age of exploration, adventurers sailing into uncharted waters saw themselves as modern Odysseus's, confronting new wonders and terrors. Romantic artists and poets were drawn to the epic's emotional depths and sublime natural imagery, finding in it an ancient validation of their own aesthetic values. Victorian scholars applied their emerging scientific methods to probe the historical reality behind the myth. When the fragmentation of modern experience shattered traditional certainties, modernist writers recognized in Odysseus's disjointed journey a profound metaphor for their own dislocated existence. Perhaps no single work better illustrates the Odyssey's enduring literary power than James Joyce's revolutionary Ulysses, 1922. By transplanting Homer's epic framework onto a single day in Dublin, Joyce performed a kind of literary alchemy, demonstrating both the timelessness of Homeric themes and their startling relevance to ordinary modern life. This brilliant reimagining, neither straightforward adaptation nor casual reference, reveals how thoroughly the Odyssey had become woven into the very fabric of Western literary consciousness. The epic's influence has transcended literature to permeate virtually every artistic medium, from ancient Greek vase paintings depicting Odysseus bound to his ship's mast while sirens circle overhead, to Renaissance masters capturing the hero's triumphant return, to bold modern abstractions exploring the journey's psychological dimensions. Visual artists have found endless inspiration in Homer's vivid episodes. Composers have translated its rhythms and emotions into soaring operatic arias and symphonic movements. Sculptors have frozen moments of the journey in stone and bronze. Filmmakers have either adapted it directly or borrowed its archetypal structure for entirely new narratives of departure and return. Beyond the arts, the Odyssey has left an indelible imprint on how we understand ourselves and our world. Psychoanalysts discovered in Odysseus's external adventures a map of internal psychological terrain, his encounters with monsters representing the mind's confrontation with its own hidden depths. Philosophers from Aristotle to Heidegger have mined the epic for insights into identity, ethics, and human purpose. Political theorists continue to examine its nuanced portrayal of leadership, community obligations, and the delicate balance between individual excellence and social responsibility. The epic's presence echoes even in our everyday language. When we speak of a siren song luring us toward danger, finding ourselves between Scylla and Charybdis, or identifying someone as a lotus-eater, lost in pleasure-seeking. We're drawing from Homer's linguistic wellspring often without realizing it. Most tellingly, the very concept of an Odyssey as a transformative journey filled with challenges has transcended its literary origin to become a universal metaphor for human experience. What explains this extraordinary cultural persistence? Why has this particular story, among countless ancient narratives, maintained such powerful resonance across millennia? Perhaps the answer lies in the Odyssey's unique balance of opposites, its simultaneous embrace of adventure and homecoming, individualism and community, fantasy and realism, divine intervention and human agency. Unlike many heroic tales that focus exclusively on martial prowess or supernatural conflict, the Odyssey encompasses both the extraordinary and the everyday, both cosmic forces and intimate human relationships. Odysseus himself embodies this balance. He encounters gods and monsters, yet remains recognizably human in his desires, flaws, and relationships. His most defining quality, adaptability, makes him paradoxically timeless, capable of translation into endlessly varied cultural contexts. He is the hero who survives, not through unchanging strength, but through perpetual transformation. An ideal protagonist for a world in constant flux. The poem's exploration of homecoming, likewise, transcends its specific historical setting. Between exploring the unknown and preserving connection to the familiar, represents a fundamental human dynamic across cultures and eras. As civilization has become increasingly mobile and boundaries increasingly fluid, the Odyssey's meditation on home's meaning has only grown more relevant. Moreover, the epic's narrative sophistication, its complex temporal structure, its shifts in perspective, its blend of genres from adventure to romance to family drama, creates a richness that rewards endless reinterpretation. Each generation finds new aspects to emphasize, new interpretive frameworks to apply. Feminist readings explore Penelope's agency and the gendered power dynamics of the household. Post-colonial approaches examine the portrayal of foreign lands and peoples from the perspective of the Greek insider. Psychological interpretations probe the internal dimensions of Odysseus's external challenges. This interpretive flexibility extends to translation as well. The Odyssey has been rendered into virtually every major world language, often in multiple versions that reflect different understandings of the original. Each new translation inevitably interprets as much as it translates, emphasizing different aspects of Homer's multifaceted original. Some foreground the poem's oral origins and performative qualities, others focus on its narrative drive. Still others highlight its poetic imagery or philosophical implications. In English alone, the tradition of Odyssey translation spans from George Chapman's vigorous Elizabethan version to Alexander Pope's elegant Augustan couplets from Richmond, Lattimore's scholarly precision to Robert Fitzgerald's poetic mid-century modernism, from Robert Fagel's accessible dignity to Emily Wilson's recent emphasis on narrative pace and contemporary resonance. Each version creates, in effect, a new poem in dialogue with both the ancient original and the translator's contemporary moment. This ongoing process of reinterpretation and retranslation ensures that the Odyssey remains not a static monument, but a living cultural force continually, renewed through engagement with changing social contexts. Each era reads the poem differently, yet something essential persists across these varied readings. some core truth about human experience that transcends historical specificity. Perhaps this essence lies in the poem's fundamental humanity, its recognition that even a hero touched by divine favor must navigate the universal challenges of identity, relationship, and mortality. Odysseus faces supernatural dangers, but also confronts the profoundly ordinary challenges of aging, family strain, and community conflict. His story acknowledges both human vulnerability and human resilience. Both our subjection to forces beyond our control and our capacity for meaningful action within those constraints. In an age of unprecedented global mobility and technological transformation, when traditional concepts of home, identity, and community face radical redefinition, the Odyssey offers neither simple nostalgia for fixed origins nor uncritical embrace of perpetual wandering. Instead, it suggests that meaningful identity requires both movement and return, both adaptation and continuity, both individual excellence and social connection. This nuanced vision may explain why the Odyssey continues to inspire not just scholarly analysis, but creative response across cultures. Contemporary authors from Derek Walcott in the Caribbean to Margaret Atwood in Canada, from Nikos Kazantzakis in Greece to Ralph Ellison in America, have engaged with the epic's themes and structures, finding in Odysseus a figure capable of addressing distinctly modern questions of displacement, belonging, and selfhood. When we read or hear or watch adaptations of this ancient story, we participate in one of humanity's longest continuous intellectual traditions, a tradition that connects us across the vast distances of time and space to countless others who have found meaning in this tale of wandering and return. As we leave Odysseus at peace in Ithaca, we recognize that his journey, like the journey of the poem itself, contains the seeds of further movement. The prophecy of Tiresias points toward future travels. The continuing translations and adaptations ensure ongoing cultural voyage. The hero may finally rest, but his story sails on, continuing to explore the endless sea of human experience in all its terror and wonder, its suffering and joy, its complexity and beauty. Like Odysseus himself, we are all caught between wandering and homecoming, between exploration and connection, between transformative experience and enduring identity. In this tension, the Odyssey finds its immortal resonance, speaking across 3,000 years with a voice that somehow feels like our own, telling us a story that, for all its ancient strangeness, we recognize as fundamentally ours. And so our journey through the Odyssey comes to an end, just as all great adventures must. As you drift toward sleep, may Odysseus's tale of wandering and homecoming follow you into your dreams. For 3,000 years, this story has sailed across time, touching countless minds and hearts, and tonight it has found harbor with you. Like the hero himself, we've traveled across strange lands and turbulent seas, faced monsters and magic, and finally returned home to Ithaca. We've witnessed the enduring power of perseverance, the meaning of true homecoming, and the delicate balance between adventure and belonging that defines the human experience. Sleep now, fellow traveler. Perhaps in your dreams, you too will navigate starlit waters, outwit cyclopes, resist enchanting sirens, and find your way back to your own personal Ithaca. For each of us carries something of Odysseus within, that spark of resilience, that yearning for home, that capacity to face life's challenges with cunning and courage. Until our next literary journey together, may Athena's wisdom guide you, And may you always find your way home, no matter how far you wander. Good night.